This month on the 11th, a writer named Sarah shares the story of a false accusation of sexual misconduct. And then her inbox is flooded with hundreds of other people saying they too have been falsely accused. A professor, a federal government whistleblower, a candidate for sheriff. What responsibility does she have to these other stories, these other people? Was it her role to decide who's telling the truth? That's this month on the 11th, a new podcast from Pineapple Street Studios.
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
For summer barbecues, road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
Hundreds of new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts. It's all on Odyssey.
Brought to you by Macy's, Geico, and Coke Zero Sugar.
Is it time to freak out? We've been freaking out for 18 months. Well, some of us have been freaking out. Others are a little more stoic and trying to keep their wits about them. Dr. Greg Poland is a vaccine expert at the Mayo Clinic. He's on our show in the afternoon with Jordana from 3 to 6 frequently, and happy to have him on this morning, approaching his 2,000th interview since the pandemic began. Dr. Poland, how you feeling?
a little bit tired and more often frustrated in trying to get the science across to a public that sometimes doesn't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, you're preaching to the choir when it comes to, science. Look, it's not perfect, right? People want a bulletproof solution. But I tell people that the vaccine doesn't make you bulletproof, but it does mean that you're wearing a helmet and maybe a bulletproof vest, and the odds of hospitalization, certainly the odds of death, go down. I have to ask you, Dr. Poland, this new study conducted by Inference and the Mayo Clinic shows the effectiveness, the efficacy of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And I know the Mayo Clinic, a big part of this in your system, tracking it in your system, that the effectiveness against the infection dropped sharply in July in response to the Delta variant. Moderna, 76% effective against infection. Pfizer, only 42% effective. I took the Pfizer, so, this has me a little bit concerned. Should I be?
Not yet. And the reason I say that is, as you mentioned about how science changes, lots of studies get done using different study designs, and they change over time based on variant and other factors. What's important is the generalizability of those studies. In other words, does the preponderance of studies agree with any one study before we make too much of it? The Mayo Clinic study is an important study, but it is what's called a retrospective observational study. That's different than a prospective study where we actually enroll and watch people. Nonetheless, what it does point to is the concern that over time with these worst variants, and they seem to be getting worse each time a new one arises, we're going to have to be very, very careful in terms of masking and decreasing transmission. Key point that you mentioned, you've got astounding effectiveness against death, hospitalization, and severe disease.
Predictions are hard, especially about the future. Yogi Berra perfected that quote. Do you think that we're going to need booster shots in the fall, those of us who've already gotten vaccinated? And you think our kids will be able to, under the age of 12, will be able to get vaccines by this, let's say, this winter?
Yeah, it's really key that we get vaccines to kids, particularly with these variants that are much more infectious than the previous original strain was. Best guess as to when kids under the age of 12 will be able to get vaccines is probably late fall, early winter time. In terms of the need for boosters, I think perhaps yet this week we will see a recommendation for people who are immunocompromised to get a booster dose. I think it's a little too early for the rest of us. We need more data as time goes on to see whether we need a booster, particularly focused on this new Delta and other variants that are coming.
Yeah, I really don't want to learn more letters of the Greek alphabet. I know there's concern about Lambda, what comes after Lambda. At some point, the vaccines may not be effective against some of these future variants. Last question. Dr. Fauci would like to see all teachers vaccinated. What are your thoughts about vaccine passports, too?
Yeah, I would like to see, let me follow the science here and go one better in terms of the public health. I would like to see every single adult vaccinated who does not have a contraindication to getting the vaccine, and that followed by children. That's our way out of the kind of code red situation we're in with this virus. This is the way that we'll control this virus and move back toward more normal lives. So it's not just teachers, it's every adult.
Dr. Greg Poland, thank you. How are you doing? I know you have a lot of demands on your time.
Yeah, doing well, Paul. Thank you. I think, as I told you, I had a very brief hospitalization due to a fever, and we know what it wasn't, and it wasn't COVID and a lot of other things, but just some kind of respiratory virus that caused a lot of coughing and fever. But thankfully, all is good, doing well, and back at work and busy as ever.
Well, we appreciate you coming on with us this morning. Thank you, Dr. Poland.
Thank you, Paul. Be safe.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives. There is so much out there that we need to understand. But for every threat, there are heroes working at the edges of science and policy to protect us. I'm Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, former Detroit Health Director and host of Crooked Media's America Dissected. Every episode, I talk to the doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders who are working out new ways to protect us against our biggest threats. New episodes of America Dissected every Tuesday. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
On Pod Save the World, we want to be your cheat sheet for global events. My name is Tommy Vitor, and each week, my co-host Ben Rhodes and I break down the biggest stories from around the world. Ben and I both worked on President Obama's national security staff, and we'll introduce you to the activists, politicians, and journalists who can help us understand what's going on around the world, what it means for the United States, and what it's like being inside the White House Situation Room during a crisis. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods.
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
There are hundreds of new exclusive stations to check out today.
For summer barbecues,
road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
For every mood, every interest, every passion. By Odyssey.